Welcome to First. I'm Mark Eichman along with Shirley Min. We're at Lake Hall for part of our show this week where gun laws and the Equal Rights Amendment are two areas we'll focus on.
And by the end of this session, it'll be the end of an era for many legislators. We talked to a couple of them about their pending retirements and what lies ahead.
And the world is changing in the field of barbering. More women are joining what's been a male-dominated field. We'll meet a pioneer in the barbershop and see what she had to go through to get a pair of clippers in her hand.
First, your public media news magazine starts now.
The Delaware legislature is heading into the home stretch for passing a budget and a slew of bills that could become law before the June 30th finish.
Last week, the landmark Biden gun bill was signed into law. The aim to curb access to guns by those suffering from dangerous mental health issues.
And this week, a state House committee also approved a measure that would ban high-capacity magazines. The gun debate is one of the items that make up our first look.
I sat down with Republican State Representative Jeff Spiegelman, whose district covers Middletown down to Marydale. A self-dubbed Second Amendment guy, he explains why he's passionate about the right to bear arms.
I am in a district that's very, very rural, a district that has very, very little police coverage, and so these are people who have to protect themselves in a situation that would be absolutely terrible. And so in a situation like that, having the most rights, the most freedoms possible in order to protect yourself and your family is very, very important to me. It's very, very important to my district.
I want to start by talking about the Biden Gun Violence Prevention Act, which you signed off on, obviously.
I voted for it, yes.
I've been hearing from a lot of people who are gun rights supporters that the problem with the way background checks are run now is that the HIPAA laws prevent the medical community from being able to properly report individuals who might be a threat to themselves or others.
Right.
Do you find that the Biden bill kind of closes that barrier?
Not completely. In its original incarnation, I would not have voted for the Biden bill. The reason why I came to vote for it was that the bill sponsor really bent over backwards to try and craft a bill that was a little more perfect. Is it perfect? No. Does it have to be? I don't think so. But it's a more perfect than it was. It does not close the loophole entirely. It does close certain loopholes, though, and very, very important to close them. What a lot of people don't realize that are out in the general public is that Second Amendment people have been saying for years that if you have been labeled a danger to yourself and others, you should not have a firearm. You should not be able to purchase a firearm. The devil, though, is always in the details of what that's going to look like in terms of somebody's Second Amendment rights. And the mental health community was very, very weary about any changes to the law that would, in their words, stigmatize mental health to remove somebody's civil rights.
The assault weapons ban bill that is being pushed through likely does not have your support.
The term assault rifle in itself is already a misnomer. That term is not correct for what they're trying to ban. So if we can't even get the terminology right, then people who are Second Amendment guys like me are simply not going to support something where you're trying to group a whole lot of these types of firearms into something. I tell my politics students, you're trying to ban race cars, but in doing so, you're banning automobiles that are legal on the street.
Quickly, bump stocks and the high-capacity magazines. Let's start with the high-capacity magazines.
Nowhere is the argument that a killer will find another way more apparent than in magazines. Modern magazines, all they are 4 pieces of plastic and a spring. They can be 3D printed, they can be shipped in from other states, you can drive across to Pennsylvania and buy as many as you like. They're not serial numbered, this bill will do absolutely nothing. And in fact, there are reports out there that the Parkland shooter used 10-round magazines. So even in that situation, I don't have that confirmed, but even in that situation, that just shows that you can cause as much havoc with a 10-round magazine as you can a 30. So really all you're doing is inconveniencing people who have them.
And then for the bump stocks, the buyback provision in that legislation has kind of changed your mind about that.
So the bump stock bill originally had no buyback provision, which was government taking of private property, which is against the 5th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution and against the Delaware Constitution. So I introduced an amendment to include a buyback program to help take care of that situation. Again, it's not ideal. Bump stocks have been around for nearly 35 years. And we've had one horrific incident with them. So all of a sudden, is a bump stock ban going to stop that? No, But at the same time, I think bump stocks are a novelty item that don't really have a Second Amendment purpose. But you can't seize private property without due compensation.
The most stunning news in Dover this week was a defeat in the Senate for an equal rights amendment to the state constitution. Through some rules maneuvering, there could be another vote before June 30th. Here's State Senator Stephanie Hansen on the Senate floor Wednesday night. Earlier that day, we talked about the purpose of the amendment, and I asked her, isn't equal rights between the sexes already a law?
Delaware is actually the only state that ratified the Equal Rights Amendment at the federal level that doesn't actually have it in their constitution. And you may remember back, or you may not remember back, the Equal Rights Amendment was proposed for the U.S. Constitution. It passed Congress, but unless it was actually ratified by 38 states within a period of time, it would not be placed into the U.S. Constitution. Well, it wasn't ratified by the number of states in the requisite time. 35 ratified, Delaware being one of them, but it never did make the 38. So we do not have an Equal Rights Amendment at the federal level, and we do not have an Equal Rights Amendment at the state level either. A lot of people, I think, confuse the Equal Protection Clause at the federal level, but the Equal Protection Clause was put in place to protect against racial discrimination. And our Supreme Court, in fact, our Justice Scalia mentioned as late as 2010 that does not prevent against discrimination based on sex. And it's really up to the states at this point to pick up that mantle.
So we've heard a lot in recent months and in recent years about the wage gap between men and women, that
Yes.
women make significantly less across the board in general. Is this something that addresses maybe those concerns?
It could, but in a small sense. Because this really is what this would affect is state action. So if you have a state, a county, a local law that's in place that discriminates based on sex, it would address it that way. It would not address it in private industry. What we've actually done throughout time, through really starting with the 70s forward, is when we've had an issue and it's occurred to us that, well, we better not discriminate based on sex in employment, right, or in fair housing or in accommodations, we better go back and make sure we add that into our Delaware code. So we have a patchwork of thou shalt not discriminate based on sex for different specific things in our Delaware code.
Prospects for it this year? Getting done?
I think it's very good. Now, because it's a constitutional amendment, it has to pass twice. Even if we pass it this year, it would still have to come back and go through another session. So, but this would be the hardest one.
Senator Hansen believes the real benefit of this amendment comes in the jobs of tomorrow. With one set of rules in place, that patchwork of discrimination prevention won't need to be done. Ironically, many Republicans who voted against the amendment wanted more what-if language included in the wording. You can read more of our coverage at WHYY.org/news.
Another issue facing the General Assembly is a bill that could help both men and women diagnosed with a disease that affects their fertility. Nichelle Polston looked into what the proposed law would bring, while advocates are raising awareness about infertility.
I myself suffered from infertility.
At one time, Eileen Ramos thought she would never have a child. Today, she's reminded of her blessing as she scrolls through cell phone pictures of her daughter.
I have a wonderful partner, but I have endometriosis, and endometriosis is not a choice. It is a disease.
To beat it, she had to seek help from a fertility doctor, and she's not alone.
So I have PCOS. That's 1 in 10 women have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which one of the biggest symptoms of that is infertility.
Marissa Reeder, along with her husband Steve, quickly discovered that in order to have their baby, many insurances don't cover fertility care services.
And I've actually had 3 different insurance plans during all of that because my employer changed coverages, and none of them covered any infertility care.
As some women come forward with their stories, one particular group of women remains silent on the issue.
Traditionally, we think it's not our struggle.
Rhonda Wright, a physician assistant at Reproductive Associates of Delaware, hopes that will change in the Black community.
We have to have conversations. We're talking about politics. We're talking about everything else. We need to talk about infertility because it's there.
But according to new mom Daisy Stanley, it can be difficult to open up about infertility.
When you're trying and nothing is happening, you kind of feel like there's a stigma on you that, you know, she can't have kids, and that also plays on your, you know, insecurities.
Chris, Daisy's husband, also weighed in on why Black women may be hesitant to talk about not being able to conceive.
One thing about the African community as well, just to take an outsider's perspective, is not only is there pressure about not to talk about it, but there's the pressure to produce. The expectation is you are, as a wife, you're going to have kids.
However, the reality is far beyond some couples' imaginations.
Roughly 1 in 8 Delawareans are struggling with infertility. I believe the number is much higher. Of those who are diagnosed, about 75% cannot afford treatment. So they receive a diagnosis and have no means to pay for care.
That's why legislators are bringing attention to infertility through Senate Bill 139, the Delaware Fertility Care and Preservation Bill.
I had introduced it because a patient advocate approached me, and I didn't realize the way that the insurance gaps currently exist. My wife and I were pregnant at the time and getting ready to have our first child. And as I've learned more about it, as I've heard more people's challenges and struggles they've gone through, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, it's the right thing to do.
Senator Townsend says the proposed piece of legislation potentially benefits the economy as well.
It's an economic competitiveness issue for Delaware. I mean, Jersey and Maryland offer good coverage. So we lose young employees, young residents to those states because they want to start a family and they've got to go there.
Supporters of the bill love this state so much they're committed to helping Delaware couples affected by infertility.
And it's just kind of shocking that something so prevalent in the population is sort of looked at as not important in insurance coverage.
This is a family building issue. This is not a policy proposal that belongs in any political party. It is something that should unite us all.
It would bring a lot of couples from hiding, because now they can say, okay, now we have hope to try. You know, you have option to try.
The option to try certainly helped the Stanleys expand their family.
You know, when we find out that we were going to have him, it was it was such a joy and such a relief, you know, knowing that I'm finally going to be a mom.
Nichelle reports this is a two-part bill. It will cover those who are diagnosed and considered infertile and those with cancer who can become infertile as a result of their disease. Those patients will then have the option to take advantage of the fertility preservation part of the bill. It has been passed out of the Senate. It now awaits action in the House of Representatives.
Coming up on First, the world of the barber is changing. More women want to join the ranks of the male-dominated field. Your next haircut is less than 10 minutes away. And at first glance, Deborah Johnson's art looks like she's working with a giant Etch-a-Sketch, but the final work is much cooler.
There's going to be turnover in the next legislative session. 9 longtime members of both parties and in both chambers have said this is the end of their legislative careers.
Gary Simpson is the Senate Minority Leader, a Republican from Milford. J.J. Johnson is a House Democrat from Newcastle. We start with some of their memories of the first bill they introduced and some of the good-natured ribbing that went along with it.
My bill was a simple little thing. Some girl had been stopped by the police for window tinting, which is against the law in Delaware. Not very many know that, perhaps. And her father came to me and said, it should be the guy that runs the window tinting shop that's fine, not the kid that's get their car windows tinted. That was the first bill. It was a simple little thing.
My first bill was, and I might get the pronunciation wrong, but it was sodomized marriage. Okay. And somehow or another I got sodomized marriage. And I got a lot of ribbon.
How have things changed in your 14 years here? Have things changed in the way sort of business is done, the tenor of discussion, or has it pretty much stayed the same?
I think it's become more open. When I first started, it was a lot of the things were closed. Actually, the first year I was on the Joint Finance Committee was the first year that they opened the Joint Finance committee meetings open to the public. I was on there for a week, and the next thing I know, they opened the doors. Yeah, so I think it's been more open the last 14 years. Yeah.
Senator Simpson, how have things changed in 20 years?
Well, when I first came in, the Republicans had control of the House. Democrats had control of the Senate. I thought that was a good system of government. There was checks and balances. If a bad bill was passed in the Senate, the House stopped it and vice versa. A lot of times I think bills are introduced knowing that they won't get through, but today, with majorities in both houses, sometimes bad bills do get through. So that's the big change that I've seen, that I would like to get back to a more balanced, when you've got one party controlling the House, the Senate, and the executive chair. That's probably not good for government. It has become more transparent, as JJ says, and I think that's a good thing.
It's nationally, we've seen sort of a descent a little bit in discussion and in civility, I think, in politics. Has that affected Dover at all, or is Delaware sort of still in that Delaware way mindset that we've kind of avoided a lot of that?
I think that there's congeniality between the two parties in Delaware still. I've certainly never experienced any ill will that I felt anyway from the other side. So I think there's good congeniality in Delaware.
I agree, and I would also say that sometimes you, like Senator Simpson's talking about when we first started, it was the House was Republican and the Senate was Democrat. However, I think the Senate was more conservative than the House was, and I think today you might find that the House is more conservative than the Senate. Yeah.
It's interesting the way the label Democrat and Republican in Delaware, it depends on your geography. You know, you're from Newcastle County. You represent the Milford area.
It's really shifted.
Right.
Yeah, right.
When I first came in, every Senate seat in Sussex County was Democrat, every one, but they were all conservative Democrats. Right. Today, every Senate seat in Sussex County, plus another half seat, has gone Republican. There's no Democrat Senate seats being held today, so that's a big shift. As you know, Newcastle County, there was a lot more Republicans being elected to office in Newcastle County than 20 years ago than today. So there has been a shift upstate, downstate as far as politics go.
Is there a piece of legislation or a bill or maybe just some idea that you really wanted to get done but weren't able to, and hope that one of those new fresh faces that's coming in, whoever they may be, will kind of take up your mantle for?
Well, I think one of my earliest attempts at getting an important bill passed was the death penalty. I've been against the death penalty since, back in high school. And that bill, of course, passed the Senate, very close. And today we don't have a death penalty. But I think that that's one that very well could come back and flip. Right. So I think that's where I'm most happy that I helped spur that debate.
And then finally, Representative Johnson.
I was disappointed that we weren't able to address the education system in the city of Wilmington, especially with the schools. I was on several task forces, and we came up with several proposals, and none of the proposals ever came to work.
You could probably catch the disappointment in his voice. The issue of how to come up with a better education plan for Wilmington will likely be batted around at Legislative Hall for a few more years.
When you think of a barber, the image of a man probably comes to mind, right? But today's barbering industry is no longer a man's world. But for Delaware's self-proclaimed first female barber, it's been a battle. But she's okay with taking the hits and blazing the way for other women. The late 80s, the era that ushered in high-top haircuts. And in Wilmington, folks knew where to go to get the look.
25 years ago, the best haircuts were boxes, pumps, Gumbies, any tall haircut you could think of, the stairs. I was doing all those type of haircuts. Today, they're not so relevant. So now fades are in. So now you have to be good at fading hair, but still be good at what you used to do. So you just have to stay knowledgeable about the different times.
Keeping up with the trends is what kept Lena Rosser's chair filled with customers.
She knows what she's doing. She can look at it or you can tell her what you want, and she don't have to see a book, she don't have to see a picture or anything like that. She just dives right in and gets it done.
The Delaware native started cutting hair when the industry wasn't all that welcoming to women. But she didn't let the negative feedback clip her wings.
25 years ago, if you look around in Delaware, there were no female barbers out there. No female barber. I mean, there were stylists, but they didn't call themselves a barber. I worked in barbershops with men. I got in fights with men. I mean, I went through a lot to become a barber. So I feel like I took the brunt of most of the hits to be a barber. And I paved the way for a lot of females today.
Cutting hair came naturally for Rosser.
I think I was more so fascinated with the artistry of it, like the designs and stuff of that nature. I used to just watch other family members and other barbers do designs, and that really gravitated to me. So I think that's what made me say, I want to be a barber, because that's what I saw all the time.
So without any formal training, she quit high school and started cutting hair out of her home.
I dropped out in the 10th grade to pursue barbering. So I dropped out and I did it for 22 years without a license. No one asked me any questions.
Having credibility with her clients was one thing, but to cut it in the world of barbering, she needed a license.
It took me a year to become a master barber. So I'm able to work with chemicals, and I can do finger waves and braid hair, and I could curl hair and cut hair, and I'm like a beefed up cosmetologist in a sense.
Jonathan Otano is the lead educator and one of the owners at the Hair Academy School of Barbering and Beauty in Newark.
I got my license in cosmetology. I was never taught the clipper work, and that's the highest demand, is knowing how to do clippers, and majority of cosmetology schools do not teach that.
Clipper work is what separates cosmetologists from barbers, and he says more women want those skills. Student Dina Safian's mother is a cosmetologist.
She's actually the one that recommended it to me. She thinks it would be a better future for me and a better opportunity. So I took her advice, and after I've taken it and been here for a year now, I'm really proud of doing that.
Classmate Shavante Givens dabbled in cosmetology first, before switching gears.
I've been doing hair since I've been in my preteen. And then, after 10 years of doing it, I realized that this is what I enjoy, but I kind of wanted to expand my craft into the barbering field.
Growth is on the horizon for Rosser too. Her barbershop is up and running, and she's considering bringing back a barber competition she hosted in Delaware last summer.
Get the Look Barber Battle, wow. That was amazing. It was an amazing experience, actually. For me to actually take an idea and make it come to fruition was dope, by myself.
Despite Rosser's entrepreneurial success, she says maintaining barbers in her shop hasn't been easy. But this trailblazer isn't afraid to go it alone.
For the sake of our first experience this week, we're going to label artist Deborah Johnson as a Jane of all trades. She's worked with clay, fiber, painting, and glass. And it was her glass paintings that grabbed our attention. Deborah uses tiny beaded glass to sort of paint an image onto another piece of glass before sending it all into the kiln. That's where it all bakes together into one piece of art. Let's head to Magnolia for a look.
work in a variety of media. I work in glass, fiber, and occasionally I work in clay. I started out as a muralist. I moved to Seattle. I started working in clay. Since I had the kiln, it was a natural segue to move to glass. My husband is in the Air Force, so we lived in Seattle for 12 years, and then we got stationed here in Delaware. I use finely ground glass powder to create imagery. And the way I do that is I build up the powder in layers. Glass has chemical reactions, unlike paint. So when you apply heat, a lot of glass will turn different colors. And I exploit that to get shading and shades of gray. For some reason, I am really drawn to intense color, which I think is one of the reasons I like to work in glass, because the color is very intense. Some of my pieces have 75 hours of kiln time, and since I have a home studio, I'm telling the family, the kiln's on, no dryer, no oven. But in the end, it's kind of an art form in itself. You have to do some hoping and praying that you got it right, because you might have several $100s or more of glass in the kiln, and you want to open it and have a success. The thing that I like about fine craft, especially glass and clay, is that the image and the form are the same. So that they're not just on the surface like a painting, they're part of the piece, and they're the structure of the work. I have to see the ending from your idea to completion. I think that's what keeps me going. I'm always happy when my work touches someone enough that they're willing, to add it to their collection and live with it every day. It's very exciting when it's like something's better than you expected. It feels powerful.
Deborah's glasswork was granted Master Artisan status by the Pennsylvania Guild of Craftsmen. You can get more information on her work, including her pottery and fiber work, by visiting her on the web at deborahjohnsonart.com.
Next week on First, we head to John Dickinson High School. They have quite an impressive robotics program. And next week, we visit the world of the weird and unusual with a trip to the Oddporium. It's part museum, part store, and all a little bit odd. It's our first experience next week.
We referenced the new Delaware tourism virtual reality video in our First Facts, and it wouldn't surprise either of us if that robotics program produces a new generation of design engineers. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min, I'm Mark Eichman. Have a great week.